with me, my atom. Furs, my atom.
Hello and welcome to this video. This video is going to be called Adam Neely Got It Right, which is a play on words that I thought was quite clever because in watching his new video, I feel that he nearly got it right, but I feel I do need to come in and put my tooth penneth in, as I always do. So that's what I'm about to do. So if you don't know who Adam Neely is, he's a music YouTuber, one of the greats, a pioneer of music YouTube, and a huge inspiration to me. When I first got into YouTube, he was one of the first music YouTubers that I watched. His videos are always very entertaining, interesting, really well researched, really well thought out. He's an incredible musician. And I've always been a big fan of Adam Neely, but he's always niggled me a little bit. And if you go back through this channel, you'll be able to find videos where I have been a little bit critical of him. And I didn't want to be so critical of him today. Now, once he became a YouTube superstar and made some money, he invested that in his band Sungazer. And now it seems, I think he'd rather be doing that than doing music YouTube. So his music YouTubing has become a lot more sporadic. So when he does bring something out, it's a bit of an epic, you know, it's a bit of a big deal. So as soon as I saw there was a new Adam Neely video out, I clicked on it straight away last night. So I watched it last night. Now his latest video is epic, incredibly produced. You could put it on a normal TV channel. It's got all the production values and all the sort of narrative competence that really makes it watchable. He's dealing with the problem of AI, and he's really exploring SUNO, which seems to be the AI software, or whatever you want to call it, that's going to win out. It's, as he says at the top of the, I'm going to call it documentary. So I want to call it documentary. No one would call one of my videos a documentary, would they? But yeah, at the start of his documentary, he says they're worth something like $2.5 billion or something, you know. So the whole industry is looking at this. And of course, the music world's terrified of AI. But Adam Neely's especially not happy about AI. And so at the beginning of this video, he steps out bizarrely from behind a cactus in the desert. We're out in the desert and he steps out behind this cactus. He's got like aviator sunglasses on. And I thought, this is amazing. I don't step out from behind cactuses or cacti. You know, I wish I could, but I can't. That's the sort of production values we're talking about, is that. And I'm sure this was a metaphor for the desert that will be the music world once AI, you know, gets its grips on society. We're all doomed, aren't we, us musicians? And music is, in fact. Because what's going to happen is AI is going to come along. People are going to stop listening to proper music. They're going to just have their own AI music. They're just going to sit at home, and they'll like that even more because the AI will have created music that they exactly what they want. That's what the AI is going to do for people. And of course, people are too stupid. They don't care about music enough to care whether it's been made by a human being or not, do they? They won't care. You know, because most people aren't deeply into music like, you know, me and Adam are. But they just, you know, want something to dance to or, you know, do the washing up to. And, you know, it will do. And so this is terrifying. And then because there's no copyright on any of it, no one's making any money, you know. And I understand all that. And that seems to be, that's Adam's basic niggle. But why does he niggle me? Well, it's because there's underlying philosophical assumptions in all of Adam Neely's videos, and I know them very well. Now, the reason I know them very well is because I used to lecture in the college up to degree level. I used to have to mark essays, but you have to understand, although I've got a degree in fine art, and having a degree in fine art gave me a very strong awareness of aesthetics and looking at what the meaning of art is, which is very interesting when you start to look at jazz and prog and fusion, because that's a very hedonistic, you know, we just love that music. We don't care whether it has a great meaning, like a Bob Dylan lyric, you know, or, you know, a book by Foucault. we don't care about that, do we? We just want to hear a really hot solo. And so there's always been a dichotomy there. They've always been fighting each other for me. But I recognise Adam because I've taught many students like him. Now he's got a PhD or something like that. He's really is an academic fellow. He's obviously went to some posh New York-based music college, probably Berkeley or something like that. I don't know where he went. He lives in a flat in New York. He once made a video where he criticised Lo-fi for not being jazz, and his basic argument, when you really examined it, is because she doesn't live the life, and the life is being a working jazz musician in New York and going to like these, jams, in people's lofts and all that type, which of course in the 1940s was a very romantic idea, but now anyone's doing that is incredibly privileged, and Adam Neely comes across to me as being incredibly privileged, and there's nothing wrong with being incredibly privileged. If I could choose who I would be, if I was sat in heaven and they were saying, who do you want to be, Andy? You could choose, and we're not just going to drop you into any old random person. I would go, can I be one of the hyper-privileged, please? So I've got nothing against the hyper-privileged, but I think he has, but he is it. And why has he got it? Because anybody who's come up through that academic world has been taught how to make an argument and then root that into some sort of philosophy, which is what academia is. It always was. There is an epistemological aspect of academia. We have to not just say what we know, we have to question how we know it, okay? And so this, the Harvard referencing that you get in an essay, the way it points to your evidence or the way you interpret your evidence and how it's weighed up, that academic framework is based upon a whole bunch of philosophies, many of them that have developed in the 20th century. But the three that I think have really gripped the aesthetic end of philosophy would be phenomenology, which is the idea that we should take our own subjective view of the world as a kind of truth. This is the idea of my truth or your truth. The phenomenologists would have been Husserl and then Heidegger. And they're really trying to map the world from a personal perspective. It's that kind of truth. Then we have the critical theorists and the postmodernists who really see the world as being a meta-narrative that is created by culture, so everything is culturally constructed. Artists don't actually create, they just amalgamate things together and present it, Of course, except for the book that you're reading that in. And also, I mentioned him deliberately earlier, Foucault, because it was Derrida who really came up with that sort of constructionist and then deconstructionist aspect of academic study of phenomena in the world. Foucault was much more interested in taking Marx's idea, Karl Marx, not Groucho Marx, Karl Marx's ideas and pushing them through a sort of seeing it as like a sort of almost like a power dynamic. See, when I say the word power dynamic, everyone knows what I mean, but that's actually quite a weird phrase, and it comes from this philosophy. Then out of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, you started to develop, and I believe this is very confused, because I think separatist ideas of identity and then homogenous ideas of identity have sort of mixed together and got very, very confused within the philosophy of identity. But basically, we can sum up identity politics as being, if you see the world in a sort of a leftist Marxist view, rather than seeing privilege based upon the categories of class, right, we're going to base them on the categories of identity. However arbitrary they are, we could justify that through phenomenological justification. Right, so those are the ideas of the 20th century. I saw those drip, when I say drip, flow into academia, flow into our schools. And so, when my kids were doing their GCSEs last year, all the English essays were a Marxist analysis of whatever book they were doing. My niece, who is at college studying art, every single essay has an identity-based agenda on it. Study feminism in art, or what are the problems faced by black people in the modern art world. It's all that type of thing. And Adam Neely's definitely, he's come through that. He has an interest in philosophy. So bizarrely on this video, very early on, he wants to tie it right down to one of the most basic philosophical principles, and that's the idea of virtue. And he brings in a virtue ethics expert. And then she sits there, and she's almost like his Harvard referencing. He uses guests like a good student would use Harvard referencing. So she comes on and she describes what's a virtue and what's not a virtue. And he starts off by saying, if you look at the aims of AI music, they are pushing certain things as virtue, like, say, impatience. But actually, if you chat to this lady, she says they're not a virtue, because if we go back to Aristotle, then he said it wasn't a virtue. And this goes on all the way through. And I thought this is really, really odd. And of course, Adam Neely's videos are always like this, is that he is always dealing with virtue and ethics. At one point in this video, after slating AI and SUNO and what it's going to do to the music industry, he then has a little chapter where he wants to look balanced, and he says, yeah, it does do some good things. And what are these good things? Helping people with cancer, helping people with Alzheimer's, helping people who aren't wealthy. So he brings to it a very established academic leftist analytical view of this. Now, some of you may have that view. I mean, it could be that a lot of you have that view, because you have to understand our schools, our establishments, and our universities operate within this moral philosophical framework dogmatically. There is no question about it. It's just dogmatic. When you apply for jobs, you are ticking boxes to say what race you are. You're ticking boxes to say all these identity things have to be known so that they can sort of do something with it, because our identity is so important in terms of fixing inequality in the world, all that type of stuff. Now, I would say this is a moral view of the world. It's moral. Now, it's my belief that art and aesthetics and music is before morality, right? It's not about good and bad. You can draw good and bad ideas from it. I actually believe that morality does not come from philosophy. It comes from the arts. But your intentions don't need to be good or bad. You could be a right bastard and still be an artist. You could be like Norwegian black metal when you just want to burn down churches and kill each other, right? But it's still art. And this is something that's very, very uncomfortable for this sort of person of a certain generation that's come through a certain academic framework, who hasn't been taught to question. What he's been taught is to treat certain virtues as though they're absolute. And he does this by going back to the sort of post-Socrates philosophers, Plato and Aristotle. And then he makes the claim that Plato and Aristotle make, that these virtues are absolute. There's an absolute virtue ethic. And we can criticize AI music and SUNO because they are not virtuous. Now, I like that. And I think we do need to bring virtue back in, because, of course, and he doesn't want to deal with this at all on his video, if you have a postmodernist view of the world and you are looking at everything as a social construction with power dynamics, which infiltrates every sentence he says in this video, every single one, then, of course, there's no such thing as morality. Morality is a social construct. Right? Human beings have created a morality, and actually our morals are perverted because there is a meta-narrative created by the top of the privilege ladder, whether that be a white supremacy or, back in history, a Jewish supremacy or Western European supremacy, whichever one you want to pick, there's a supremacy, and they control the narrative, and in controlling a narrative, they keep this idea of inequality. So you have to fight that by balancing it, right? This is the overwhelming politics of identity. Now, I am not criticising it. And I believe that there was a point in human history that view was actually very useful. But the thing with AI, and this is what I wanted to point out in terms of Adam's video, and I'm going to show my sort of philosophical assumptions now, the beliefs I have about the world, but I am going to preface these by saying these aren't absolute morals or absolute virtues I'm talking, because I don't know. I don't know whether I'm right or not. I really don't. That's the whole thing here. And I'm aware of the counter argument. So what I am going to posit now is a very Hegelian idea of the way the world works, which is the idea that culture and society is going through sort of a revolution of change. Epochs go past in a certain way. It can't possibly be the case, but if you watch my videos, that would be my criticism against me, and I've had that. I've actually had a doctor of philosophy challenge me on it, and there's an interview here where he challenges me, and that's why I'm aware of it, because I was challenged by it, and I took that criticism on board. So I'm now going to try and temper that, and I'm going to tell you what I think is going on. We exist in a society in the West, in Western European, and our Western European ways are so bloody brilliant. They provide so much comfort and loveliness and produce, human beings like Adam Neely that live right on the top of the thing, where they've got lots of money, they can do exactly what they want to do, they don't have to go out and fend for food, they don't have to protect themselves from a totalitarian system that has got them like that. He can do whatever he wants. He lives in a world where he has freedom. And freedom for me fundamentally is not freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is actually contained with a much more important freedom, and this is freedom of expression. I can express what I want to do. That is the mark of a tolerant society. I can go out into the world and not so much spread hate, which is I believe a less liberal idea, which comes from the philosophies that we've been discussing before on here. I believe that when I create, there should be no censorship on me. So I can do whatever I want, knowing that an artist does not do whatever they want. They do what the muse, this is another Greek idea here now, is what the muse tells them. I'm going to express myself, right? And if, say, in my life there's been trauma, I may express that trauma. And when you look at that art, it might be really uncomfortable to look at. And it might not seem that it contains these sort of virtue ethics. We might have to create a new philosophy, the philosophy of cathartism, to explain why the Norwegian black metals exist in the 20th century. But the fact is they do. And I think it's the payoff from living in a Western liberal democracy, which I said is so successful that many of those ideas have also been taken on by communist countries like China and all sorts of countries around the world. They all have a little bit of Western liberal capitalism in there. All of them. Everybody aspires to want to live in that sort of a world, I think. And what is it fundamentally that they can do in the morning when they wake up? Be free, i.e. do what they want with enough wealth to buy yourself the space to do it in. Okay? We're so used to that we don't realise that in human history, the period where you could do that is like a blip. We're living in a blip. Right? The ideas that brought about this blip that makes our life so wonderful is English liberalism. That's the best idea philosophically that anyone's ever had. With English liberalism, you have utilitarianism, you have pragmatism, and these are all about, what makes the world best. Now, I could offer you the criticism of pragmatism and utilitarianism. I can tell you what that is. I'm not going to do it now, but if anyone's ever seen that thing where you're supposed to pull the lever and kill a load of people in a truck to save one bloke, or not pull the lever, or whatever it is, that moral conundrum. That is the counter to this. So you see, I may seem opinionated on my videos, but actually I'm approaching this from the aspect of the first great, foundational philosopher of Western philosophy, and that would be Socrates, who says, a wise man is the person who knows they don't know. I got told that by a philosopher many years ago, that I think I know when I don't. And I think Adam falls is that's what fails this. He doesn't know. He doesn't know, and he just assumes certain ideas through this. And in his position of privilege, he wants to show that he's considering all these things so that there is a virtue. Music should be performing a virtue. Then with that should, if we go back to the liberal philosophers and look at Hume, he would question the very existence of that should. Right? Why should music do good? Why should it be ethical? Why does it have to have virtue? Why does it have to have all these things? And so why is AI music not music if it doesn't have virtue? Right? Why? That's a fun. I don't quite understand that as a principle that he spends an hour and a half sort of exploring. And none of this solves the problem of AI music. Now, I use the word problem with those little things around it. Yeah, 2 fingers bobbing up and down. Because I don't know if there is a problem with AI music. I don't feel like there is. I think what we have is, this is where you have my sort of view of the world, we are going through an epoch shift in the West. Probably not other places, but the dynamics that created this comfort zone that we live in, that has existed probably from after the Second World War on, existed for less people before that, the sort of the democratization of privilege, which we believe has come from sort of Marxist values, but they haven't. They've come from liberal values. They've come from allowing people to be free, to express themselves, to have choice, but also to have to engage in a capitalist system where they have to create their wealth and then with their wealth buy their freedom. And I know there is a utopian idea that why can't everybody have that because there's enough to go around. And once liberalism had kicked in England, in Europe, philosophy goes another way through Hegel and all that sort of thing. And Karl Marx he's like a genius of almost like countering liberalism by taking the idea of material science, which had been the change that had brought around this liberal world. So you have the Renaissance. It starts with the arts. You have the Renaissance, and the Renaissance then creates the Enlightenment, and science suddenly kicks in, challenges the idea of God and an ordered universe, and all that sort of virtue idea. Now we're in a materialist world, and out of that comes this liberal philosophy, plus also the technology industry comes out, and suddenly people have got money in the back of their pocket, and they've got a house, and they get a weekend, and all this type of stuff. They can go on holiday, get on a train, all these types of things that happen, and that comes about through the industrialization of the ideas wrought in the Enlightenment. People from Britain go to America and they build their country on those liberal ideas. That's the American Constitution and Bill of Rights, which then creates the greatest country to ever exist, basically, the land of freedom and all that type of stuff. But those who had a much more European way of thinking, who had read the phenomenologists and read the critical theorists and read the postmodernists and seen how that had influenced identity politics, intersectionality, queer theory, all these ideas that were informed by that, they looked at them and said, no, hang on, this isn't fair because there's people at the bottom of the pile. And this idea, and I don't want to do a video of how this got into our system and how it's absolutely through all the schools and colleges and establishments and everything, why these ideas. And if you don't think they are, they absolutely are. Because here on YouTube, there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about. swearing's not going to get me cancelled. Talking about sexual matters is not going to really get me cancelled. I could talk about whatever I want unless I stray into this world. If I stray into it, YouTube could shut me down, but also the people watching it, those who are against me even critiquing these ideas, have been trained to act in an emotional way. So they won't go, I don't agree with Andy. They will go, this is absolutely wrong. I'm not going to watch him anymore. They will self-cancel. They will self-censor because they believe that the virtue is to never question these ideas or go against them. In questioning these ideas, I have been accused of being a fascist, a neo-Nazi, and all these types of things. Although I keep stating over and over again, I would class my own politics as being centre-left liberal. That is what I am, totally. I just am. If I'm not, then point out where I'm not, and I will change, because that's what I want to be, a centre. I don't want to be on the extremes. I want to be a centre-left liberal, okay? But I'm very aware that that is my choice. I choose my virtue ethic, and it's not set in stone. It has to shift, because if it doesn't shift, it will atrophy. And I know this by looking at the history of art. Not just the history of philosophy, but the history of art. The history of music. And one of the things that's interesting is that when we look at music, there's an anomaly with music. For all of human history, okay, music was pretty much folk music for everybody, and that meant everybody was involved and it was communal, right? Now that still exists, because if you go watch a football match and you're chanting along with the audience, that's music. I know it doesn't seem like it's John Coltrane, but it is music. And music has a function. You go to church and sing some hymns. You're involved in it, but the music industry, right? The music industry is a blip. Because there was a period in the 20th century where they could make money through two things. One was the physical product, the records, and they sold in the millions, and people would become a millionaire because they could sell. And that creates the music industry. And that industry is based not upon great art, but it's based upon novelty. All the records that sold loads start off at their core with something that's a novelty. It's not coming from high art. High art in the 20th century was siphoned off to the wealthy, and you'd always had that. That's what classical music is. The kings would have their composers, or the church, and they would hire them to do the music they wanted. The people, normal people, knew nothing about it. It had nothing to do with them. That idea of elite music, which now is opera, the ballet, conceptual art, jazz, that's all these things have been decided that they're an art form and have been siphoned off, while the people have watched film, TV, pop music, computer games, and now the internet, TikTok and all that type of stuff. And you would find it hard to argue to the elites that TikTok is an art form, that YouTube is an art form. And you would find that really hard to even argue, because the commercial aspects of art in the 20th century are based upon novelty. And novelty, bizarrely, once it's mechanized and can be propagated through the other thing that the powers that be have, which was control over our experience. Because rather than just being down your local tavern, listen to some music like there, or round your uncle's, singing roll out the barrel around the piano, they had control of it for years, through cinema, through radio, and through television. When the internet came along, the internet changes everything, because it democratized it. So now I have my own little TV channel, and I broadcast like this, and it costs absolutely nothing. I have a microphone. I got a computer over here, which is digital. It's like a recording studio. It's recording the audio, and I've got an iPhone for a camera, and I'm set up, and I can come and talk like this. And as long as I can try and keep this conversation interesting, there might be a small audience, small enough for me to eke out a living, and I can express myself. All the danger in a normal person being able to speak and say what they think, right? The powers that be don't like this. So the mainstream media's recoiled against this, and now they're losing. The mainstream media's losing. Then that idea that Derrida, that everything's constructed, it's all a social construct, and there's no creativity in the world, and the complete taking on of that idea, which then establishes itself in the general public as, well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. If somebody likes it, it's good, isn't it? Right, that's basically it. Once you get that idea, that is an idea that's underpinning art. People are making art based upon that idea because that's what they believe. Right, so when the technology comes out, the digital technology which democratizes this and makes it all exciting, by the same token, it can be used in a different way, and it is being used. AI is the technological outcome of the epoch we are exiting and what we believe to be the case. It's being enacted by AI. Right, all AI does is it's like a so-called social construct. It goes out into the world, finds things that human beings have made, and then it just repackages them up. AI music is just one up from the mixtapes we used to make in the 1980s. It's far more about choice. It's far more about the individual and their response for it, because that's what the internet's done. It's put the response back onto us. We now collate what we want. We don't just sit there and watch whatever's on the TV. We have our own, playlists. We have our own, channels on, on Netflix, and we can watch the films whenever we want to watch them. And you can come on your YouTube channel and pick YouTubers that will talk about extremely esoteric subjects, right? Like me, and you will be able to sit and watch it. There's no way mainstream media would fund what I'm doing here and talking about this. Adam Neely's is niche. Adam Neely's video is niche, and then me reacting to it and just talking into a camera like this is incredibly niche. But we could do it, right? My point is that Adam Neely is now 37 years old. He's not the kid. He's not the privileged kid at Jazz College doing his PhD anymore. He's not that. He's 37 years old. He is exactly like in the peak of being a person in the world. I'm getting to be too old. Some people are too young. He's part of the thing. He's most employable at 37 and all that type of stuff. And the values he has. And it's those values that have created AI. And to understand what AI is, you have to look at those values. There's a belief that the technology sort of promotes creativity. That's another 20th century thing. Whereas actually, I believe technology reacts to creatively what's going on. All right? The two things are working hand in hand. But once capitalism spots a novelty that it can push across its media control centers that it's got, then the technology starts to change, because that's where genius comes in. Genius is never in the novelty. The novelty is just people doing stuff and they like it. And then when it really kicks off and there is a commercial gain to be made, geniuses step in to outdo it. So all the 20th century art forms, whether it be cinema or pop music or jazz or computer games, they go through this cycle, I believe. This is very Hegelian, I know, but this is what I believe happens. Somebody does something as a novelty, the technology spots it, sticks it out to the world, everybody loves it, so everyone starts to copy it. That's capitalism. In that, the next track on has to outdo the last track, and so because of that, geniuses step in. With jazz, it was Louis Armstrong. With rock and roll, it was really Bob Dylan. And there is probably some computer guy that was a genius that stepped in at some point, after they invented that tennis game. I don't know who it would be, because I don't know enough about it. I'd love to know who it is. And they're a genius. They step in and they change it all. And then people start to see that the skill level is really important. And then it becomes about the skill. And the skill creates like a renaissance within that art form. And for us, that's the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Yes, Genesis, and all the post-punk bands and all that golden era of rock and roll. With jazz, it's the beboppers and the 1950s, going up to that year, 1959, the peak jazz year, where we had those art, are run by Mingus, Kind of Blue, Ornette Coleman, and Dave Brubeck's Time Out, that classic 1959 year. That's the peak, that's the renaissance. And then it's reacted against. Then the art form dies, and in dying the elites come on and go, no, it's really valuable, let us put it in the museum, and they pick that thing up and they place it to the museum, and at that point it becomes like you can't question it. Now the very philosophical ideas that I'm criticising, I actually think they're good ideas, but they atrophied in that way. They had a utility because they created rights for people. They gave rights to black people, gay people, and all that, and I'm totally for all that, and I think it's wonderful. But then those ideas are so important. Once they didn't have any more utility, the academy came along and went, we don't have to take those and turn them into virtues. They're absolute, so they don't get questioned. And that has really been strangling our society for the last 20 years. Then the internet comes out, and the internet, it suddenly provides a voice. And these novelty things come in because people are challenging it. You know, people are going, oh, I thought it was absolutely terrible to say anything against black people whatsoever. We had to walk around respecting black people at all costs. You know, we have to put them first in our respect. You know, we can't say this, we shouldn't say that, and that's cultural appropriation. But now these blokes come out saying, no, well, no, really, that is racist in a way. I never thought that before. The mainstream's not saying this. That novelty begats a whole bunch of things which has gone through into our political system now, and is causing absolute chaos. And why is it causing chaos? This is something that our society is finding really difficult, because we're going through an epoch shift. It's not about whether you like these ideas or not. We are going through an epoch shift, and that period, which we could call the postmodernist period, although it's much bigger than just postmodernist philosophy, all those ideas are crumbling. They're falling apart. They don't work anymore. The world's shifting. People are terrified. When it gets like that, people think it's like there's going to be an Armageddon. They think there's going to be a slip into the most terrible aspects of the 20th century, which was those two world wars. And people look at what created those world wars, which were created in a completely different cultural epoch, and they try and spot those now. And all of that is being placed onto AI music. And I tell you why it's being placed on, because the people who are looking at it are looking through that lens. But my belief is that it's bigger than this. We are going through a cultural shift, right? I try and talk about this on here. I'm usually combating by using humour, and all this type of stuff. So there's a video I did the other day where I critiqued or reacted to Tim Henson's new track. And the reason why I did that, I did it in a comedic way, is because underneath it, I really think someone needs to poke some fun at it. Not try and bring it down in a very pompous way by saying this is absolutely terrible and immoral, which is what Adam Neely's trying to do with AI. Just to push the button. And this is what I try and do on this channel with music. I sometimes will try and push the button where I believe the elites have their, the spot they don't want pressed. And then they go, oh, what's going on? This man's absolutely, he's a fascist. Everyone call him a fascist. You know, they've criticised our absolute beliefs, our moral virtues. No, moral virtues are always up for grabs. And the artists should be free to do that. That's the sign of a healthy society. Anyway, what is the problem then? Why is AI a problem? I'm going to tell you why. Because in this second half of this atrophied postmodernist epoch, which I'm trying to describe, certain ideas came in. Because once you try and say, no, these ethics are these, you can't touch these ethics. You know, racism is bad and it should never even be questioned. We know what's racist now. I think you're racist. Don't be so silly. I was once talking to a lefty about this once, and I said to them, what you just said was racist because of this. You're actually, everything you're saying is prejudiced against black people. You're making assumptions about black people. Now, of course, the idea of racism has atrophied now in the West. His reaction was really interesting because he turned around and he goes, well, if that's the case, then I'm a racist. And he would rather be accused of being a racist than let go of his prejudicial ideas about race, which came from identity politics. It was fascinating, right? Because he didn't believe. It was like, no, call me a racist. I'm not a racist. Because by doing these things and believing these things, I'm not a racist. I know you put an argument through which I can't really challenge, but I don't need to challenge it because I know you're absolutely wrong. You're probably just Satan coming in and saying things I can't argue with.
I don't like it. And that really was the attitude. So that atrophying of value, where you have to make them absolute virtue. This is what he's doing. This is his go-to reaction to AI. Let's go back to Plato. Plato had this idea of a perfect realm, and from that perfect realm, everything had fallen. You know, like Adam and Eve. This is why I picked on the Tim Henson thing. This is because I could see that he was going straight to that, and then presenting his virtue artistically as being absolutely precise and perfect, Platonic, Platonic. What's the word? Exposition of skill. Skill being a virtue, you know, tied in with a whole bunch of ideas of perfection, sin, and also pulling in ideas of, you know, trendiness, gender, all those sort of things that the kids love. And I thought I'd poke some fun at it. That's why I did it. I didn't just do it to just pick a random track. There's a reason why I did it. And here I am, few videos later, for those people who are interested in what I do, and I'm explaining it in a serious point of view. Adam Neely does this on this video as well. He goes back to Plato and he brings about this idea of perfection. Plato's idea of perfection and virtue ethics and the absoluteness of them is in absolute is in absolute opposition to the postmodernist ideas he has of social constructions and Foucault and power and all that, which are also through his things, all the way through. You could hear him talking. He starts to talk about copyright as being a way of safeguarding the product of labour. It's there all the way through, you know. And I feel like copyright's not that. What are you on about, you know? But he believes that's the virtue of copyright. You know, we're workers. Us musicians are workers. We've got to push against, you know, the bourgeoisie that are trying to control everything. That's obviously what's going on here. I mean, look. The bourgeoisie have said that this SUNO is worth $2.5 billion. He says, first thing he says is, oh, that's a criticism. You know, and we've got to watch this. We've got to safeguard ourselves. Where's the union of musicians that shall safeguard it for us? And I have to be honest, he comes across like a Luddite. In the UK, we had Luddites that when, you know, the factories came, they smash their tools up and say, we're not going to play this game. You know, it's a bit like King Canute, to go even further back, saying, I'll stop the sea. But of course, he was trying to show that idea was ridiculous. You can't stop it. You know, the reason why AI is here is because the values that have atrophied in the postmodernist era. And they have atrophied towards the Platonic. We have values now that can't be questioned. All right. And those values that can't be questioned, they've been able to monetize. This is what's bizarre. We were exploited in the industrial ages, that you had to sit there and do 50 hours a week doing that all day long to get enough money to get your Sunday off to go to church, and then get the afternoon to read a newspaper and feel like you'd, you had a bit of time to yourself. That was the deal. You know, that's what Marx reacted against, and he was right to react against it, and there should have been rights, and those people need to be helped, and I agree with that 100%. But with the onset of digital technologies, they don't need us as a workforce. What they need is us fighting. They need people to be on one side and another, and they need it to be emotional. At the weekend, I got into a bit of a political discussion on Facebook, and the guy who was a fan of the channel, I'm going to say his name's Steve Tilling, because he's a lovely bloke. We had a row on Facebook chatting, but it was a friendly row. There was humour in it. He was a nice guy. I hope I was a nice guy. At the end of it, we were laughing and joking, and there was actually a little spread of love, and I connected with one of my viewers, and he went away going, I don't agree with Andy, but I think he's a good bloke. That's a virtue. You know, approach people like, assume they're good, go up to them with a smile and with some love, and let them in, and if they turn around and bite your arse, then kick them up their arse, or bite their arse. But until that happens, don't assume. Don't think you know. Don't assume there's these virtue ethics that you need to, hold yourself to. The internet
is making money out of it, because they have made us take one side or another and then hold to it with almost like anger. And through that argument start and through that discussion, that's what churns the internet. I'm very aware of it as a YouTuber. You know, I come on here and almost lampoon it by having fake outrage, fake hate this, fake hate that. And I do it in the realm where it is safe, which is the arts. Arts come before morality. Get into political discussion, it could become really dark and horrible. Getting into discussion about whether Neil Young's any good, it doesn't really matter, right? So these are the ideas. By going towards that Platonic idea of virtue, we have brought in the idea of perfection. As I get to the end of this video, I have tackled this so many times on here. Artists believe they need to be perfect. They wind in their self-loathing into that. If they hear themselves not being perfect, they react in a way. I don't think folk musicians in the 19th century felt like that, but our aesthetic ideals that have emerged out of sort of the industrialization of entertainment and the creation of the audience and the artist exists on Mount Olympus being perfect, whilst us mortals look up, and we have basically that Platonic realm of perfection we have placed as being the Mount Olympus where these superstars live, right? And as the 20th century went, as the entertainment industry grew, your ownership of that Mount Olympus sort of perfectionism was copyright. And huge amounts of wealth that seemed sort of irrational to normal people, that you could sing a few words and write a few chords, bang it out there, because everyone's using it, you become a multi-millionaire, and your family and your kids for the next 4 or 5 generations will never have to work because of that. And now AI can come along and just copy it. Really? Yep, it can. And it will. And the bloke who runs SUNO is intellectually onto something, because he believes that music needs to be put back in the hands of the people. When they listen to their SUNO tracks, they will love them. And he sees the big problem with it, which Adam Neely also identifies, is it's a very solitary thing at the moment. So it's that in itself is atrophying. He knows that. You'll end up with everyone just listening to their own music like this. So you need to interact, and they're hoping that there will be some sort of AI in the future where they're interacting with other people. I'm sat here because everything about me is to be able to afford to be able to sit in my studio so I can make music all day long. I have to make music, right? So even though I do YouTube, every day I'll do a little bit of music. I don't care whether it's good or bad, I just do it, I have to do it. And I have to have a studio to do it in, and that's why I'm sat here. That's my luxury. I pay for that. And that feeling of having a reaction to the world and then being able to express it musically and then hear it back, and maybe someone else hears it and I can communicate to other people how I feel about the world, is something that I want to do. It's probably because I'm a narcissist, but that's what I want to do. I'm sure all musicians are narcissists in a way, right? But now people could have that reaction to the world, and rather than having to learn an instrument and do all that stuff, they could just write that reaction into SUNO and they get a track that seems to ape that. But of course it doesn't ape it, does it? AI is only a problem if human beings decide it's a problem by thinking it is something that is human. The recourse to post-Platonic virtue ethics that is just the knee-jerk reaction for Adam Neely is that, for me, evidence of his view of the world. Now, what's interesting for me is halfway through that, there's an interlude. And rather than create some great big flashy thing where his virtuoso was on play and every note was absolutely brilliant, he just faffs about on a piano and plays a little bit of bass. I loved it. It was like human. It was refreshing. It wasn't trying to make it, I loved it. And I thought, Adam, you're onto the right thing there, right? If you want to beat AI, what we have to do is we have to go, I value what human beings do. I don't buy some Platonic idea. I don't believe there's anyone on Mount Olympus, right? I believe that human beings are human beings and they can express themselves. And when they express themselves, I can feel it. And that can be aped by AI. But when it's aped by AI, we're still hearing the humanity, because what AI is aping is not the perfection. A machine can do perfection better than human beings. We learned that in the 20th century. And it ended up with people being, put into concentration camps and gassed, right? That's the truth. Now, embrace your inadequacies, embrace your foibles, embrace your less than ethical thoughts, express them and don't judge it. Don't think, oh, that needs to be more perfect. Get out in the world and do it. And once you realize that that's the value, you will realize that AI doesn't go anywhere near it. The idea that the feeling I get from sitting here and playing the guitar and trying to get into that zone where I'm expressing myself is the same as me have an expressive guitar solo like Stevie Ray Vaughan with a bit of Scott Henderson in, and then the guitar solo comes out like that, right? And I don't want to go into how clunky AI is, because when it says it takes the world of music from you, it just takes the bloody top of it. The cliche, put Latin jazz in, put Latin electronic jazz in to AI. You're going to get Weather Report. You're not going to get Irikira because they're not as big, right? And I know this, right? But that's by the by. The way to solve this is our culture needs to change. And the way our culture needs to change is, rather than seeing everybody's a rainbow and believing all that identity politics bullshit, we have to go, we are just human beings. We do things that are right. We do things that are wrong. We say things that are stupid. Sometimes we only say stuff because we want to have a voice so people will notice us, right? We can express ourselves and we can express how rubbish we are, how stupid we are, how silly we are, right? And that is of value. And you don't have to look good. You just have to express yourself. And the emancipation of people, the true emancipation in terms of freedom that digital technologies can do, is enabling everybody to do that. And I don't mean go onto AI and make your music. I'm on about play your own music, write your own poems, paint your own pictures with paint with a brush. Once we've decided that that's where it's at, right, we beat the AI. And with that, I hope I have in the end landed somewhere positive on this video. And if Adam Neely does watch it, I think you nearly got it right. And I would not have had these ideas without your brilliant video. And you are still the man. He's still bloody amazing. When he comes back to it, we all sit up and listen. Adam Neely's the guy. But I think he needs to critique some of the ideas he has that come from his virtue ethics. I have no problem with his, if he can believe whatever he wants in terms of virtue ethics, but I think he needs to separate them from aesthetics. I would love to have a conversation with him. Of course I would, because I would get loads more subscribers like when I went on Rick Beato. So I'm putting it out there, that I'm getting them confused now. Adam, if you're watching this and you've got to the end, I massively respect what you do, but I haven't flinched. I've come in here and told you what I think. I think what you do is absolutely amazing. It's very inspirational. I would love to have a conversation with you about this, because I think if we get our heads together, we can actually make a statement where people will go, right, because it's all about your stance and what you believe. As soon as you say, oh, sod this AI off, then it goes. That's the answer. End of the video. Bye-bye.